you can do that possibly people haven't found out about or have never really explored. So let's just start off with some history so you understand where we're coming from. So originally Routegadget was developed in Finland by someone I've never met, never even talked to. We've emailed, but he could be sitting next to me on the bus and I wouldn't know who it was. Anyway, that's Jarko. He's still very active in orienteering. He posts on Notesport and Attack Point frequently. And anyway, he set it up. He wrote the original code, released it in Finland in 2004. And within Britain, it was Paul Frost who found it and said, hey, this is a really good idea. It would be really good if we could get other clubs to use it and introduce it. And as far as I can tell, the first event that was set up in this country was set up by Paul for South Downs, the club he was then with, Tilgate Forest. And in fact, we can, if I switch to the right place, which is, sorry, that one, we can still see the Tilgate Forest event there. So that, as far as I can tell, is the very earliest Routegadget setup. And if we go to this, there's a whole load of familiar names with Jonathan and Neil Crickmore at the top and various people that many of you who are listening will know. Back to the history. So all that was great and people started to use it. And then a problem developed. The software was written in a language called Java, and Java wasn't the greatest when it came to running it on PCs because of security problems and update issues. And so people started to find in about 2013 that this was not going very well and they're having real problems using it. And I was one of the many people trying to use it, and I knew Paul, and we had other conversations about what we were going to do about it. And so towards the end of 2013, I put together what was then a prototype and has turned into the system that you're now used to, a new version of Routegadget, which got rid of Java, implemented it in lots of flash new technologies at the time, HTML5, JSON, JavaScript, and said, well, look, here you go, this might get around the Java problem. What do you reckon, Paul? So we played around with it a bit and got some other people involved, and they all said, yeah, this looks really nice. So that's how the new version of Routegadget emerged, was just to address this problem that other people were having. The sort of things I was thinking about when I did this, the first problem we had is we had a lot of installations already in Britain and other places, and we wanted to be able to use the existing sites without any changes. That was number one. It had to be backwards compatible. This was about the time when mobile phones were really taking off and people were saying, why can't I do this on a phone? So usability on a mobile was one of the considerations. Wasn't great at the time, still not great. If I did it again, it would be totally different. But hey, as I said, this is still the prototype. And the thing I was pushing was I'd like to have, this was something I was going to release for people to say, hey, free, take it on, do whatever you want with it. So all the source code is available through my GitHub account, and the address is there. And what this means is, A, people can use the system and set it up themselves if they want. And the other thing is that people are able to contribute suggestions, code updates, or whatever. And a number of people have added bits of functionality that you see in the system that's now running. So that's what we were aiming for. The other thing to just explain is quite how all this is managed behind the scenes. There's the domain name website routegadget.co.uk was the one that Paul set up when he started to provide the service to say to clubs, look, I'll run it for you. And it's all done through that routegadget.co.uk site. Paul's now stepped back because we got to the stage where it made no sense in that I knew the new system and was willing to take it on. So most BOF clubs will now be registered as www.happyhearts or Mole Valley or South Downs, whatever, routegadget.co.uk. And there's a few other strange things, like the British has got a separate site, JK Sausage 6 Day. I went to an event in Albania and they said, can we set one up? So there's a www.albania.routegadget.co.uk. So we've got 104 of those that I currently support. And one of the things with all of those clubs are covered by an OS license, which is one of the issues is about use of the maps. So that anything that's displayed on my site, that routegadget.co.uk site, is covered by that license. And A small number of clubs have got their own installations, no problems with that, and if they're technically happy to do that, that's fine. So clubs like, I think, Nottingham, SOS, a couple of others maybe Forth Valley, I'm getting that wrong, one of the Scottish clubs. And it's been picked up by a small number of other people around the world, and we'll see some of that later. So that's behind the scenes, and I'll now get away from the PowerPoint because you don't really need the PowerPoint. We'll start trying to do this for real. So hopefully this will all work as you'd expect. So let's go to what people should probably be familiar with. You get into Routegadget and there's a screen. Let's just go through the issues. On the left-hand side, a number of tabs. You can select the event you want, just to highlight some of the things. This little world sign is the files geo-referenced, so that GPS tracks will go on very neatly, as long as the map's reasonably geo-referenced. And again, there's an indication up here just to say that a large number of clubs are now managing to geo-reference their maps, which really helps things. So we can sort courses, results, and drawing over there. What I'd like to be able to show, and I'm struggling because there we go, the bit I was trying to see was hidden. So over in this corner, I'm sorry, I'm going to be waving my mouse around. I've put a big cursor on, so hopefully you can see it. But up in the top right, you've got a number of little icons worth playing with. So working in from this end, right-hand side, there's a help button. So that brings up various statistics about the event. For some reason, I still calculate the total time of runners. It was of interest at some point. One thing to highlight, and in fact, I've had an email just today about this. All of the people who've entered comments, they're all listed here. So you don't have to search through the individual results. You can just go to this button at the top and find what everyone's written, and then go and look at their particular routes to see what's going on. And then down the bottom, there's some useful links that you might want. So there is an online user guide, which is linked there. The link to GitHub, so let's see, the source code is here. There's a list of all Routegadget installations, which I'll talk about right at the end. And if you're responsible for setting up your club sites, there's a direct link into your manager logon there. So just a few useful links in there. But to me, the most useful thing is to have a quick look at all the comments at big events like this. And you can see some statistics about the course. I'll close that one. And it's also showing you the version I'm running, but more useful for me to debug things. Next in, there's a configuration button, a whole load of configuration items. We'll go through those later because that's one of the things I want to explain some of those things. A whole series of buttons here to do with the display. So people have worked out that to zoom in, you click the zoom in button. To zoom out, you click the zoom out button. I very seldom use those two buttons over there. I've got a mouse with a wheel in the middle, and the scroll wheel scrolls in and out, and much easier. And it'll scroll in and out around wherever your mouse is. So if I put my mouse over here, it disappears. So if I want to scroll in around Control 20, I can just put it there like that. So I thoroughly recommend getting a scroll wheel if you can on your mouse to do that sort of thing. But you can do the equivalent with these. It's just a bit slower. This one over here just resets it. If everything disappears off the screen or you get completely lost, you just get it back on the reset there. You can actually rotate the map. That's useful if you're trying to say, well, how am I going to run, for example, 16 to 17? It's much easier as you would in the forest. You put the control at the top and you say, well, that's why. So it's more intuitive to do it that way than to have it the default way, which would be to have it over here and you're trying to think, well, how's that? So rotate the map with those two. And a couple of others at the end here. I was talking to someone this weekend, and he was saying, oh, I've only just discovered this button here. This button here, this is really annoying because my screen's got stuff on I don't want on it. I'm just going to turn that course over print off. If I click the right button. And then this button here, this little circle, displays all the controls at the event. So you can see where every control was. So if you went out in the forest and you said, oh, I sort of found something else, this will allow you to find what it was. And you know, so if you're running down, you said, oh yeah, I saw 155, but I'm not sure where it was. This will allow you to try and find it. So that's the screen layouts. Let's move on to, I said I was going to share that. This is beyond belief annoying. I'm sorry, that's something you probably can't see. I'm getting real problems here. Right, let's just go through these configuration options because they're worth just being aware of at least. So one of the early things was people said, oh, I can put it like it's in a different language. So if you speak Japanese, we do have a full Japanese translation. Can't say I've used it a great deal. And equally, we've picked up translations from various places, Russian and whatever. So that might help some people. So next, map intensity, not so much an issue here, but when we come to replace and things, it sometimes helps just to turn the map background down so you can see stuff on top of it easier. So when I put stuff over the top of that, it shows up a bit better. Let's go back to 100 there. Similarly, if I display a route, so let's put my route up from the weekend, there's my route, and I might decide that it's a bit too dark and I can tone that down as well. Just a bit of a nicety, and I can make it bigger, and so on. You can control some other things, or I can make the overprint a bit bigger. So all of this you can just play with. The default settings should be perfectly adequate. But what you'll find is that any of the settings you set here are saved on your PC locally. So for that particular club, you'll get these settings again unless you go back and change them. So the three down the bottom here, interesting ones. Firstly, if you're ever drawing your route, there's a button here to control when you're drawing whether if you get close enough, it says, yeah, I'll say you found the control, whether you have to click on the absolute exact position of the center of the circle. I tend, to be honest, I'd always leave that checked for the drawing purposes. Otherwise, it's really sometimes quite difficult to draw your route. For very historic reasons, you can see when you're replaying, the old system used to put little +3s all over the place to say you were standing still. And they get really annoying on GPS routes, so I'd really recommend not turning that on, but it's a backward compatibility thing. And we'll talk about GPS speed colors later because that's one of the features I want to go into more detail. Okay, so we've been through the screens. Hopefully most people will remember most of that, of what I've shown so far. So we've on the courses tab, there's all the courses. We've said you can, if I come back to there, we can put all the courses on if you want to see how the planner's taken people around. This is also quite useful just to, if you ever want to go in and see quite how the flow has been organised or what courses go where. One of the discussions I was having with the planner of this event at the weekend was, he said his least favourite course was, I think, the green. And the reason we worked out is that the green is the one that was constrained by this fence. So all the longer courses went south of that fence into Burnham Hedges and the north, and that's the reason you had the problem. And it allows you to see things like that, and you can see how the planners worked out, oh, I've got to fit a course in this area, if you're ever looking at that sort of thing. So on the results page, most people should be fairly familiar with this. We can see everybody's course. We can use it to bring up routes and whatever. We'll see that in more detail later when we look at some of the replay functionality. But essentially, it's one of those, you shouldn't be able to break anything, so just click all over the place and see what happens when you're getting used to it. So let's now move on to one of the first things that people were seeing Routegadget for, which was to allow them to draw routes. I just need to take that route off that I've got displayed. That's on mine, isn't it? It's there. So here we go. So drawing routes, very straightforward. You just select, for purposes of testing, we'll just put this in as a, let's pick one of the yellow ones. And it brings up the course. You select somebody. For now, I'll just do this and I'll delete this one later, but anyway. And so it now allows you to draw, and so I can start drawing my route, zoom in a bit, and say that's how I did it. And when I get to one, I can draw my route again like this. One of the things you might not be aware of, and as I was saying earlier, it's clearly when you're out in the woods, you tend to have the control you're going to at the top. So one of the options you've got is if I click this button here, align map to next control, from the point where I get to this one, it will now, each time you get to control, it will automatically align it. So once I've clicked on that control, it now allows me to just draw it there, and that can be a lot easier to remember what you did and whatever. So I must admit, I very seldom draw my route for reasons we'll talk about later. But if you are drawing your route, that's a very useful button to know about, because it just intuitively it's more straightforward. That's how you would have looked at it in the forest. There's various undo features, so you can undo your latest bits. I'm sure, again, just play with this and you get to see it. And essentially, let me just very quickly put in the whole way through. I'll just draw it like that. And I think people are pretty aware of this. There we go. And then you just offer the options to save or reset, undo. So there we go. And it'll now, if I go to that yellow course, if I go to that yellow course, you should find, if I add the yellow course up, not the white course, there we go. There's the route we just drawn. I'll delete that one later, don't worry. So drawing, yeah, fine. The majority of people nowadays, sorry, let me just take that off again. Anyway, the majority of people nowadays are, of course, recording their runs on a GPS watch. So GPS, again, very straightforward. What you need is to provide a GPX or a TCX file. Now, both those formats are standard outputs from any of the software that you'll get with your watch or whatever. So in my case, for example, I've got a Garmin watch which uploads to a thing called Garmin Connect. So Garmin maintain all of them, but then you can link that Garmin account into a Strava, and I know many people use Strava because it's got a lot more functionality. So this is my Strava account. This is my run from the weekend. And to export out of Strava, it's very similar on other systems. Somewhere there will be an export function. So just export that as GPX. And I save that locally. And then what I can do is go back to where I was and just browse for that file. Somewhere in my downloads. That one there it is. I can just pick that up. So what can we do to play with this, and then how does it work? Let's just put it back up this way. Now this was a reasonably georeferenced map, and to be honest, that's a pretty good fit already. I've got the option of manually playing with it, but to be honest, to an extent, you're just making things up if you try and adjust it, because the map probably wasn't right in the first place. So in many cases, I'm tempted to just leave it as the raw upload. However, people got really agitated and said, oh, my GPS doesn't fit very well. So I didn't want to, but in the end, I've implemented this auto fit function. So if you've uploaded a GPS track, you can press auto fit, and it tries to do the best fit it can. And the way it does that is it looks at your time at each control and tries to work out what the best fits of all the times it controls are compared with the locations and the controlled locations. And there's some strange maths in the background, but it basically tries to find the best fit it can. And this offset says, well, I think your watch is about 3 seconds different to race time. And you can play around with this, and it changes the fit slightly, but it's generally pretty good. So if you do use auto fit, that's fine. One thing to remember with auto fit, it will never do anything with the start and finish, because start and finishes tend to be not quite where the triangle is or the circle is anyway. In this case, the start wasn't far off of there. That's not too bad. In this case, I think we probably had the finish a bit further right than it's shown, so you can always drag it back or just leave it where it was. But if you do use auto fit, start and finish may need a bit of a tweak. Things people are probably aware of: if you've had an event where there's been a road crossing timed out, or where you've had a voided leg, if you use the results with those legs taken out, then the auto fit won't work because it's not got the right timings in any of it. That's one of the reasons we'll come to later that I would recommend you to use the original splits for Routegadget when setting it up, rather than anything with any corrections made, because it's just a representation of what really happened. You need to see Routegadget as an analysis tool, not as the definitive results system. But anyway, so just be aware that if you have got results that have had road crossings taken out, for example, the auto fit probably won't work very well. The other question I get asked all the time is, oh, I started my watch early or started my watch late. If you just upload your route and don't press auto fit, that's fine. If the map's georeferenced, it'll go in the right place. If you do want to auto fit it, it is possible, and then you can play around. If you start a minute early, for example, if you put -60 in this box for 60 seconds, it's probably pretty reasonable, and you can play around. It's a bit of an advanced feature. It's not really meant for those purposes, but you can try playing with that. The other things people say is, oh, why can't you let me edit my if I started early, finished late, why can't you let me edit the file in Routegadget? I could, but it would be an awful lot of functionality that isn't really core to what we're trying to do. There are other programs available that allow you to edit your route. So if you do want to edit your route before you upload it, I'd recommend doing it in one of the other available ones, or even just you can do it with a text file editor. It's a very simple format you can look at just to take off the first 5 minutes because you started your watch early, or the last 5 minutes, up to you. But I don't really want to put that functionality in because it's just a lot of extra stuff that doesn't really contribute to Routegadget itself. Okay, so let's talk through drawing routes, uploading routes through GPS. I will come back to some of the things about what you can then do to see what people did and what was going on afterwards. But as I said, I think we're going to have a short switch over to the manager side of things, just so people are aware of what's going on, and so I can answer some of the questions that I've had. So the manager we can access in various ways, but I'm going to go in through this link I've got here. So some hero in your club is probably charged with doing this after every event. So if I log on here, they're faced with something fairly similar to what you're used to. The first thing I need to do is add my map. So if I put up, I'm just going to use Shepherd's Park Wood and hope this all works. So if I browse to my, no, it's not going to be the one I want. So Shepherd's Park Wood is there somewhere, that one, and I want that event. So there we go. So this is a GIF file or a JPEG you can use. These you can generate these from OCAD. It will be the general way, or Purple Pen itself will also export the maps. So you need that. Hopefully, as I said, a lot of clubs moving on to georeferencing. So there's a separate georeferencing file just to say how that piece of paper relates to the real world. This is an example of this idea that people can contribute. This little function over here, which shows you where you've told it the map is, and make sure you've actually got the right georeferencing. This was done by Matt Pickering, who just out of the blue sent me some code saying, hey, why don't you add this in, because it'll stop people making the mistakes they're making. So this is an example of a little bit of extra code that's been dragged in from that I knew nothing about and have managed to incorporate, which is really useful. So there's my map. I can add that one, and off it goes. And we have the maps. And then for the event itself, what we're on Shepherd's Park Wood test. I can put that in. I need to select the map I want, so it's that one I want. This is another Happy Hearts event. Let's say it's today. Pick a level, local level. And so the other two things that we need are a results file and courses file. Results are, so the critical thing about getting events up is to make sure that whoever's responsible for putting Routegadget up has liaised with the planner and the person responsible for downloads. So I just know when we've got an arrangement that I always get emailed the results in this necessary file first thing after the event. So normally by the middle of the afternoon, after a Saturday morning event, I'd have my results. This is CSV, so this is standard BOF format. It'll also support the IOF formats for results. So I open that, quick summary, so you sanity check that you've got the right file. That all looks okay. Similarly for courses, this is an export straight out of whatever you planned in. So Condes or Purple Pen or OCAD will generate this IOF format. Pick that up there, and there's the courses we've got. And then it's just a question to make sure that the results and course names match. Sometimes you use slightly different names, so you can do a mapping there. One of the critical buttons to think about is this one. So there's a button here that you can tick or checkbox that says this isn't a normal event. This is has individual courses, and individual courses covers things like butterflies, score events, relays. So the critical, if you're setting up any of those, tick that, and that'll create an individual course per person rather than the course for everybody. There's guidance on all this on the website. That gives me all the courses and controls. Again, because this is georeferenced and it's come out of Purple Pen, which understood the georeferencing, all the controls have come in the right place. You might have to adjust this, but anyway. I can now just press create that event. And there we go. There's my event set up. So you can see that if you've got all the necessary files, which is the critical bit, it really is a job of 2 or 3 minutes to get this up. But it needs quite a lot of organization beforehand to get to the point where you can do it in 2 or 3 minutes. So that's what's going on behind the scenes. One of the questions, again, people were asking is whether the people responsible for this used to be recommended to back stuff up separately. The current hosting system that I've got, it runs an automatic backup of everything daily, so I can always go back to a daily backup if anything is needed. To be honest, in 2 or 3 years, I don't think I've gone back to more than 1 or 2 events where I've had to go and recover something. But I have available backups of things on a daily basis that we can go back to. So there's no particular need, unless you desperately want to do it separately for yourself to back your own sites up. If you do want to back it up, I need to issue a separate FTP account, which some clubs have got, but not many. But fundamentally, there is a backup in place, and it's taken daily, so I've got pretty good coverage. Okay, so we've seen what's involved in setting events up. We've seen all the things. Let's now move on to 2 or 3 of the functions that people may not have seen. Oh, sorry, I'm just going down through here. Yeah, the only other thing I was going to highlight here was that one, please, I really prefer people not to crop the map. I always disappointed to see a map where the map has gone to some effort to make it look nice and then to be cropped around the edge. The biggest culprit was that Purple Pen used to do it automatically, and we managed. I talked to the guy who produces Purple Pen, and I convinced him it was a good idea to leave the whole map in. So he's made a change in the past 3 or 4 months, which is why a lot more maps nowadays will be coming up showing the full map rather than a cropped map. Just to me, it always looks nicer and you get a better idea of it. And the other thing, as I've already said, if you have got road crossings, I'd really recommend you not taking them out. So use the unadjusted splits for Routegadget, and use the adjusted splits for definitive results on the sites. Okay, I'm going to get rid of that one. We don't need that one anymore. What I want to do is I want to go back to here. So this is the event from the weekend, as you can see. No, in fact, I'm not going to go to that. I'm going to go to this one. So let's just look at this GPS speed colouring, which is a reasonably new function which people may not have seen. So you've got a button here on the configuration, which allows you to either say, yep, just show me my normal route, or show me GPS speed colours. Originally, when I introduced this function, it was just everyone had their own set of colours. If the map is georeferenced, these speed colours are now actually correlated with speeds. So what you now get is a range between green, meaning whatever you set for the minimum fastest speed per kilometre you want to look at, red for the maximum, and anything that's worse than that is blue. So what that means is even with the default settings, so 5 minutes a kilometre is pretty fast in a forest, 15 is still reasonably fast for some people moving through some of this rough stuff. It shows me, well, I came out at the start and was going okay, had a bit of a nightmare going up this hill, and you can see it's getting really slow. Had a real nightmare going through this patch of green that I just missed the gap, and there you go, that's my story anyway. So you can begin to get some real indication of where you were running fast, where you were running slow. This is quite a nice illustration. So long, slow downhill, or long, steady downhill, I'm going quite fast up there, get the other side of the field, and then a real slog up through this rubbish here. One of the nice things is that if you want to be a bit harder on yourself, you can say, oh no, actually tell me where I was going. I can adjust this in real time. So show me where I'm going less than 10 minutes a K, and more blue will emerge. If I go back to 15, you can see the blue disappears. If I go to 10, the blue comes back, and that's showing me. And you can similarly, you can take this down further. So you could make this, I think I'll take it down to 3. I'm not doing 3 minutes a K in many places down that hill, getting closer. So this is actually quite an interesting feature when I've been playing with it. You can start to see all sorts of things. Clearly running uphill is a problem. What this is beginning to highlight to me when I start to look at it is I'm having real problems running downhill fast as well. So this is a downhill slope, but it is through rubbish. But I can see here I'm really going quite slowly down that hill. There's a very similar issue over here. So coming over the top of the spur green, and then this green felt reasonably runnable, but I'm running really slowly in this bit and really, really slowly in the steep downhill green. And it just, to me, it's showing up, yeah, I've got to be really careful if I take route choices downhill through bad runnability. But this is the sort of thing you can start to play with and look at. I've not had a chance to do it, but one of the things I'm really interested in when we start getting into some big sprint races again is to start seeing how fast some of the elites really are. When you take this down to 3 minutes a K and 5 minutes a K as your 2 limits, and start seeing where they're, do they ever go over 5 minutes a K at a sprint race? We'll find out. But people could start to play with that. Anyway, that's a reasonably new function. And to me, it feels actually quite useful, but I've really not had a chance to play with it in any detail. And other people can now explore it. Now I've highlighted it, it's there. The other feature that I've been playing with for a while and never got a particularly wonderful answer, but we're getting closer, is, and one of the problems I've got is it's hidden and it's very difficult to find out how to do it. If you double click on your name, it will bring up some fairly detailed analysis of your run. So it's very difficult to indicate that that's available. It's not ideal from a user interface point of view, but anyway, for events, it doesn't work for score events, it only works for normal courses. But if you double click on your name, you will get this window brought up. So this has got a summary of how you are doing and some other information. So you can see your average leg positions and how slow and whatever you've got. It's got an estimated time loss, and we'll have a look at that in a minute. And a performance consistency number. The performance, these are both rather arbitrary, but at 100% here, in a very similar way to the way wind splits is done, it's based on that. 100% would mean that you're running at about the 25th percentage runner. So anything over that, anything over 100% means you're in the top quarter. Anything below means you're below that. And consistency, the lower the number, the more consistent you are, so the less variation there is about how you do on each leg. So 2.8 is reasonably low. We'll see some examples in a minute. But what you need to be looking for is try and get your performance up and consistency to a lower value. So for each leg, we can now see a summary of everything. So you can see who ran the fastest leg, you can see how far behind you were, what percentage that is. And then there's a predicted time that you should have taken on that leg. And you can see I was doing okay on that leg because my prediction comes out as 255 and I ran 256. And there's some losses, suggested losses down here. So this is the British Knights. So as I was saying, you can see that my mucking around going up the hill, this says I'm only losing 34 seconds. Okay, the calculation is complicated and open to debate, but at least there's some sort of indication there. And it's highlighting correctly that I definitely lost time at this control. I definitely lost time at this control. These are sortable, so you can sort these. In fact, most of the columns I think are supportable, so you can quickly find out where you had your best legs, where you had your worst legs. So that first page is individual legs. There's a very similar page for cumulative times. And you can now see a splits table. One of the problems in doing this is just finding enough space to put all this information whilst still being able to see other things. So it's not ideal, but I think it's better than it was. It's certainly better than the first implementation I got to. And on this splits one, you've now got this idea, a listing of how people are doing. So as I said, 2.8, I was having quite a reasonable run from a consistency point of view, where I'm down the bottom here somewhere. Other people are a bit higher. So interestingly, that's consistency says, well, he didn't have a particularly good, he may have come well up, but he didn't have a particularly good run. We could have a quick look to see how that relates to actual loss prediction. So there's a spread of losses here. Yeah, it's just the way the calculations have come out. There's no big one, but it's not as consistent as other people. Again, for information and interest, and gives you some things to start thinking about. And so the things to remember, just double click, and you can double click on anybody and you'll get that. So we've looked at GPS colors, we've looked at that statistics or performance analysis. The one thing I was going to also cover was replays. The replay I was going to use, well, let's do one on here for now. Oh no, I found one on here which worked quite well. So if I go to here, I'm going to select some people who've drawn their route or uploaded their route in GPS. And we'll do it like that. So, and I'm going to just go through the replay functionality. So you probably know that you can select people and then you can just say go and off they go. And you can see what happens there, and I can put on this tails function down in the corner. I can turn it to show a trail of where they're going, and that's all wonderful. And to many people, that's probably as far as they've got. There are quite a lot of other ways of doing this. One of the other ways of doing it is to do it in real time. So if this clock icon, if I clock, it changes between people for some reason and a clock. But if I click on the clock, you can now see the real-time clock running here. And what that means is that we can see people running and how they were relative in the forest. I was talking to someone again at the weekend, and they're saying, oh yeah, this is really useful to find out who it was that you were running with at a particular time. I'll show you a much simpler way to do that in a minute, but this is one of those ways. So this can show you in real time who was where. Let's go back to normal time. The other thing that not many people have played with probably is this start at. If you go into there and do start at by control, it will now run each control and then wait for everyone to catch up. And you can see, get a better, so you can see, I'm sorry, David, but David had a bit of a nightmare, got to 3 before 2. And you can see how people relate on individual legs rather than for the whole course, and just gives you an indication. One of the interesting things here, for example, you can see, this is one of my competitors, NC, so if Neil's listening. I'm surprised at how many path routes Neil was taking. But you can see. So just play around with that by control is always quite interesting. You say after all that, they're all going to they get there not that far apart in the end, and so that can go on for a long time. So that by control is a useful one. or interesting one to play with. Don't forget that there's a time one there. Let's just stop that. I was going to show, I'm just looking at the time, just because I've got it set up, and because to me it's quite entertaining. This is the JK relays from a couple of years ago. The time is 10 o'clock, which is about the start of the mini mass start for the mass start for the junior course. So if I press go here, what I'm going to do, so that's the start of the junior course, and what you'll now see is at 10:10, which is now, a huge another pack goes out, and then at another 10 minutes you'll see another pack go out. There they go, that was the 10:20 starts. And this just gives you a very interesting view of quite how the packs stay together or don't at relays. So all this is essentially simulating in real time what was going on. There we go, this is the long courses heading out to the top. 10:40, another big pack about to go out. And there you can run it. So it's to me, that's quite entertaining. So you just play around with the various options, you can find things like this that will work. Okay, so we've talked about replays. The one final thing I was going to talk about is Splits Browser. So the button up here, this icon, takes you to Splits Browser. And again, I'm sure many people have found this. So Splits Browser is just more of this analysis functions and graphs. So you can see how people are doing and whatever. I know many people spend hours playing with this. And you can see race graphs. The thing I was going to show you that someone at the weekend said, oh, I didn't know you could do that. Let's go to my course, for example. So I ran short blue. If I just highlight me, there's this wonderful button up here called crossing runners. And what that does is, for the person you selected, everybody whose time crosses is now shown. So you can see I started here at the bottom, and all these people, somewhere in the forest I passed. So again, if you're trying to find out who you saw out there, this is a very straightforward way of seeing all the people that you overtook. So, well, from the weekend, I definitely remember running with Mick for half a leg. I remember overtaking Jim, didn't see some of these others. But anyway, if you are ever trying to work out who that was, this crossing runners is a fantastic function. Splits Browser is a function similar way to Routegadget. Splits Browser was written, it's now maintained as an open source, freely available to anybody. You can upload directly to a Splits Browser site, but this is integrated with Routegadget, so it just saves you having to upload it separately. I'd really like to do something similar with WinSplits, but it's not quite as straightforward, and I've never really investigated taking that further forward. So Splits Browser, again, worth going and playing with all sorts of things, and there's probably an option somebody could spend a webinar just going through what Splits Browser will provide. And just to highlight the final thing that I was going to come to, again, if I come back over here, some people will, some people won't have seen that. This link here to all Routegadget 2 installations. So if I click on there, there's this Routegadget 2 statistics page. So this is just straightforwardly a list of all events that have been uploaded to Routegadget. So every night about 3 o'clock, it polls around all the installations and says what's new, and it lists all the events. So this is a really nice way of seeing all the sort of, and this is, to me, this is one of the beauties of British orienteering, that I can go back to last weekend and just see the huge range of events that were put on. From, you see the Scottish terrain, you see the south of England terrain, you could see all sorts of different stuff. So we've been looking at the Ace of Hearts and Burnham, which many of you will have been at, the Burbage. So there's this wonderful rocky area up in near Sheffield. And you can see they in fact had a special enlargement of some of this because it was so complicated. But just the sheer variety of events that you see coming through. And as it turns out, there's an event, I'm linked to many of the sites that are installed around the world. So this was one that turned up over the weekend, was in Pretoria from South Africa. So this is Pretoria Botanical Gardens, and that's a map I'd never have seen unless I've been watching things come through here. So if you're interested in what other people have got and what's been happening, this Routegadget statistics page is useful. You can take an RSS feed if you've got an RSS reader. So this page is, as they come in, there's also a list of all the sites that are available. So as it turns out, listed by the number of events. So Lagan Valley, in fact, in the lead. It's Lagan Valley and South Ribble and Hertfordshire. We're going to struggle to catch them. But some clubs you can see are very, very, very active. Other clubs, less so. Right, I've got to my 45 minutes and I've been talking solidly at somebody, I hope, for 45 minutes. I think at this stage I'm going to stop. Just check that I've answered all the questions that I had, which I may have done. Backups, 2 different notes. Oh, right. Let me just specifically answer a couple of questions that we've got, and then Tim can check in with any others. There was a question about one of the things, I've not even said that. So if you've got a small screen, you can hide things with this arrow backwards and forwards. For history reasons, it also works clicking on the Routegadget icon, and that's how you do it on a mobile phone if you can't do it otherwise. But what someone had said was that when I do that, the map resizes, and so I can stop it because I spent ages clicking over here to get it the size I want. There is no easy way because you need to basically relay out the screen when this happens. What I'd suggest is, if you've got a scroll button on your mouse, it's pretty quick rather than having to go and click up here. So all I can really suggest is try it on the scroll button rather than doing it with the buttons. But I'm afraid that yes, it does readjust when I do that. And the specific management question was, can I set up an event with 2 different maps? No. The setup is there's one map for an event in Routegadget. So you can either set up 2 events with the 2 different maps. Most cases of that, you're using a small part of the area and a big part. You should always be able to set up all of the courses on the big map. Depends exactly how you've set up your purple pen or condes file. But no, if you've got 2 different maps, then you really do have to set up 2 different events if you want to keep them as 2 different maps. Right, I think I've covered everything, Tim. I'm rather hoping you're about to chip in and say whatever has come in, if anything.
Yes, Simon, I've got a quick one here that says, how can you go over how you see all the other events? They missed it when you were actually going through, so they just wanted you to show them how you got to all the different events.
Are we talking this page? Okay, so this is the sites, well, the links there, but the easy way to find it, if you go to any Routegadget installation and click on the question mark, the link is down here, all RG2 installations. So there's the links there. So that's accessible from any Routegadget site that you get to, and that just takes you straight through to there.
Lovely.
Okay.
I think that's that question on. We've not got any other questions at the moment, so obviously if anybody does want to come in now with any extra questions, please do while Simon's here for the next 5 or 6 minutes. Yeah, if there's anything else anybody wants to be reminded of, or
one thing whilst I was going to highlight is that down the bottom of this page there's some statistics about what we've got. So we're getting close to 10,000 events, but we're getting very close to 200,000 routes, and my guess is that if the British Champs go ahead, if the virus doesn't stop things, the 200,000th route is likely to be drawn around the time of the British Champs this year. But you can see I mean, Parkrun does something similar at the bottom. There's some silly numbers, but if you think that I've got nearly 1.5 million results uploaded, 58,000 courses, so there's quite a lot of stuff out there that people have put in.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic results, isn't they? Incredible.
I'm just going to see, go down. Is there anything in here? Any areas that leap out that I've not looked at recently? D-side stuff's always entertaining. you see, this is the trouble, that down south we have these grotty bits of wood with bramble in, and up north they manage to run events like this. And you think, oh, I'd really like to be running on that. Why can't I go and run on that? I think that may have been the British Knights actually at one stage. But to me, just looking at all these different maps is one of the really interesting things. One of the other, if I go to some of these other sites and sort some of the other countries, well, yes, since we've mentioned it, let's have a quick look at the Albanian one. So there's an Albanian event occasionally. 2 or 3 years ago, I went to it with my son, and so here you go. This is what Albania looks like. This is what you've been missing. So day one was a really fantastic top of the mountain overlooking Tirana, cable car to the start, and then we ran round. And these circles are all well, Albania is actually full of little concrete bunkers. I think there's sort of several 100,000 of these that were put in place during the communist era. And so some of these were used as control sites. So that's a really nice area on the hills above Tirana. Day two is on the coast, just northwest of Tirana. Fairly hilly, really complex bit up at the top. Looking out over the Mediterranean, and then on the third day, we did a sprint race around. This is the university in Tirana, but Old Town Tirana and the university. So we had a great time. We said, let's set up Routegadget for you, which they were happy with. But that's the sort of thing you can find just looking through here. But equally, what's the most? There's some Finnish stuff here, some Belgian stuff.
There's another question for you,
Yep.
if you got a chance.
Yep.
It says, for GPS to work in Routegadget, must MN be accurate to current?
No, the magnetic north is absolutely irrelevant as far as GPS is concerned, as long as you've correctly georeferenced the map. You could set the magnetic north to be 0 or whatever it happens to be in your area. But when you're doing the georeferencing, that's when you tell it what magnetic north offset you want to use. But then from then on, that leads to a world file, which is used when you set the map up, and the world file tells you how to go from a GPS trace to the way that map is set up. So as long as you use the map correctly, it doesn't really matter what you've used for magnetic north.
Lovely. There's another.
Yep.
Sorry, Simon. Another question. What if someone else puts my route?
Yeah, but puts my route up. Yes, this was always one of those problems. It's a game of trust. The only way. Well, no, that's not true. Let me just tell you the story of this as well. If someone has drawn your route and you want it deleted, what you need to do is contact whoever manages the site for that club. So if you email them in the manager, you do have the ability to delete stuff. So if I could work out which one I've got open, no, I haven't got it here anymore. Anyway, so if you do need the route deleted, contact the person who administers Routegadget for that site, and they can delete routes for you. If you look here on the left where I've uploaded my GPS route, there's a little dustbin, and I had a wonderful email from someone who said, I'm really upset that Routegadget comments on my abilities, because every time I draw my route, it puts a dustbin against it, and it doesn't do it for other people. And what this dustbin means is you can click on there and it will allow you to delete it. But the way it's set up, you can only delete the route on the PC that you use to draw it. Just stops random people deleting your routes for you. But that is a function that has been added reasonably recently. So if you need to delete your own route, that little dustbin will do it. But as I say, it'll only work on the PC you drew it on. Otherwise, if you contact whoever runs the site for the club, they can delete it through the manager system.
Another question, Simon. Who covers the cost of hosting?
Costs, essentially, the hosting is sort of part of other packages of websites that I've got. So it's all, there's map runners in there and some other stuff I do. So it's covered within a website I maintain. The OS licenses, the order of just under 100 quid a year. So it's me, but I just see it as something that I do. So Paul Frost used to try and charge, but what he found was it was actually more complicated to get people to pay.
And
what
the
was
supplement to that, Simon, is does British Orienteering give you any funding towards it?
Well, they don't. In that I've never really asked. This is just something I do because it's interesting, and I'm quite happy to do it. You know, you look on it as well; it's the equivalent of going to an event once a year. The current situation is that any of the funding that's necessary, I do, and I'm quite happy to cover it on the basis that it's something that interests me, and I'm happy to manage on that basis.
Another question, possibly the final one: is the list of the latest 100 events searchable?
Is it searchable? Probably not in any useful way. You can go to individual clubs. No, one of the things I keep thinking I could do some more to pull all this together into a single accessible database, and I never have, and it would be interesting. Now, this as it stands, it's just a straight list, and you'd have to scroll through to find out, other than being able to go to individual club sites over here. So that'll just take me to the South Down site, but it's not really searchable in that sense that you're probably asking for. So no, I think the answer's not really.
We'll go with the final one: is how to geo-reference a map.
Right. It's not something I'm going to do in 5 minutes or even 2 minutes here. There is guidance on the BOF website under the mapping area. One of the documents there explains how to do it. OCAD has actually got some reasonable instructions in as well. But yeah, I start with the stuff on the BOF mapping resources as a way forward, I would suggest.
I think basically we've reached the end of the time. I'd just like to thank Simon so much. It's very, very interesting last 50 minutes, and hope you've all enjoyed it. And obviously we'll follow up with any other questions, and I'll see if Simon then can answer them, and I can get any answers out to any of you in the future. But obviously this will be available for people to revisit as well. So thank you once again, Simon, and It's been excellent.
Thanks.